In this lesson, we'll take a look at an Android sample app. In following lessons, we'll be going through a lot of details about the Android development system, but first I'd like you to see how it all works together as an end result, sort of like knowing where we're headed on a long trip. We'll use this graphic as a reference, and I'll show you how it all works with actual tools as we move through the steps. After this lesson, you'll be installing the tools and learning how to use them. So what this graphic shows is how to get sample apps from the Android developer's website into your Eclipse development environment and fire up the app code on an emulator to see it run. So we'll start with the sample apps all the way through to running on the emulator. You'll often be starting an app development using a sample as a base. We're going to use the Lunar Lander sample from Android 2.2, also known as Froyo. Many of the examples we'll use will be based on Android 2.2 Froyo. Follow this link here to see details on SDK usage. We'll take a quick look at that now. About 12% of Android devices are still running on Froyo. So if your app targets a version above Froyo, Gingerbread or Honeycomb and so forth, users of Froyo devices won't see your app in the Google Store and won't be able to download it. Froyo is a common platform target for many apps. This still leaves about 3.5% of devices below Froyo if you add these up. This is a small slice of the pie on older phones, so most developers are targeting Froyo and up. The first step in accessing the samples is to use the Android SDK Manager to download samples from Google servers. To see how to do this, you can reference samples instructions on the Android website using this link. Let's take a look at this. This shows you how to find the SDK in your file system and start it from there. There's an easier way in Eclipse, however. Let me show you in Eclipse itself. You can use the Window drop-down menu. Come down here to the Android SDK. Click on that, and it'll start the SDK Manager. I'm going to show you another way to do it. There's an icon here. You can click on this icon, and this will also start the SDK Manager. In the SDK Manager, you choose which samples to download and click on Install. There's samples for Android 4.1.2 and so forth. I've already installed many of these on my computer, as you can see. To install the samples, you would click on the samples. Let me find something that I haven't installed. I've installed all the samples, but let's say I was installing the dual screen APIs. Click on that, and then click on Install. To bring the samples into Eclipse, click on File, Import, Existing Code into Workspace, and then you would browse where you have your samples on your computer. I have them on my C drive, Program Files, Android SDK, then there's a Samples folder, and here we see the samples organized by release. So for level 8, you see the different samples. So to import a sample, we would, if we wanted to bring in Searchable Dictionary, click on that, click OK, click Finish. And if you look here, we now have the Searchable Dictionary app in Eclipse. Now, I already had the Lunar Lander app installed. Here it is. So I can bring in the Java code for the Lunar Lander. So now in Eclipse, you see some Java code in this center window. So once you have a sample in Eclipse, let me give you a brief tour of what you'll see. You'll see source files, Java source files. Here in the Lunar Lander example, we have 2. When you double-click on the Java code, you see the code open up in the center window. I'm going to skip for now some of these folders, point out to you the resources folders. The resource folders contain things like drawable images, layouts, and values that you want to keep separate from your Java code. So for example, if we open up this drawable folder and double-click on the App Lunar Lander, It's a PNG file that my system is opening up in Adobe Fireworks, and you see here the image of the little rocket lunar lander. We look further down. In the layout folder, you see XML that defines the screen. We'll be looking at all of this in more detail in future lessons. Just for right now, you can see that this is a graphical user interface for laying out elements on the screen for your app. So, for example, form widgets, text fields, layouts, etc. And the final folder that I'm going to show you contains values, also defined in XML. So in the lunar lander sample, they're defining strings. So for example, the app name is lunar lander. And in Java code, the app name would be referenced using this name, app_NAME, instead of the actual lunar lander text. So this allows things like localizing your app to different countries and keeping your code better organized by having the data that it references separate from the code. Going back to the outline, in a separate section, we have something called the manifest. We can double-click that. That also opens up in the center window. And the manifest contains information about the app, such as the package name. So now that you've had a preview of what the sample app looks like, we're going to first start an emulator. To do that, come up here and click on this Android Virtual Device Manager, and we'll choose one of the emulators. The emulators are going to simulate the behavior of an app on a phone. And I'm going to choose this emulator, and we're going to start it and launch it. So what you see here is not a real representation of what an actual phone looks like. It's showing, obviously, a screen on the left and a keypad on the right. And as I'll explain in future lessons, there are ways to define different kinds of screen layouts in terms of size. And we're going to unlock the screen, as you would on a real phone. Now we're going back to Eclipse. And now we're going to start the app by clicking on the debug button. You can see down here on the console that it's letting us know what's going on. It says it successfully started the app. So we'll go back to the emulator, and there you see the first screen of the app. Now, as it says, the way this app is constructed, press up to play. In this case, we're using this button here. So it's up to play, left and right to move the rocket around, and the center button to fire the engines. So let's give it a shot. Oh, let's fire the engines. We're trying to land on that green. Went too fast. I've played this a few times, and it's a little tricky. We'll give it one more shot. Press that again. All right, let's fire the engines. Let's try and get it over that way. Fire the engines. Uh-oh. Well, you get the idea. So I hope that seeing the major components of an app has helped you get a feel for the big picture and where we're headed.